Catus. Maximus here, this time with a review of the fairly high power SoFirn SP33v3. Actually, SoFirn had sent this to me. They actually sent me the SP31, which I thought was a nice little flashlight, and some people commented that of all the Harbor Freight Quantums and stuff, this is definitely better than anything Harbor Freight's ever sold. Quite seriously. They said it was my first real flashlight. I believe the SP33 would be considered my first real flashlight. Runs about 50 bucks on Amazon. So obviously my video wasn't cringy enough for the SP31 because they did send me the SP33. As we can see, it is a fairly substantial flashlight. Definitely pretty heavy. The reason it's such a large diameter is the large battery. Let me go and demonstrate that here. We have our 18650. And then this is a 26650 base flashlight. One thing I'd like to mention about the SoFirns, and it's been consistent with that one and this one, is the fact that they use gold-plated springs on both ends and that they really clean up the threads. Man, every flashlight I've ever bought from Harbor Freight, it feels like there's grit, sand, there's flakes of metal coming off the caps when I unscrew them. Every Harbor Freight flashlight's like that. They're terrible. Really getting kind of annoyed by that. The threads on these SoFirns have definitely been cleaned up because they are certainly smooth. They lube the O-rings. They include a little lanyard and a couple of extra O-rings. Now, this flashlight, I should get back to it, uses a 26650, a 5500 milliamp that it comes with. So as we can see, this is a much more substantial battery because this is a 3500 lumen light. So right about triple the power of this little guy. And they include a pretty serious battery to go along with it. And I don't remember, it may have been in the manual for this SP31, but they actually have a reason for these not coming with protected cells. Even though the springs, and they advertise it being compatible with protected cells, the reason that they don't is apparently the protection circuits, there's quite a bit of variability with those batteries. And the protection circuits can actually get burned out on their very high load situations, such as with these flashlights. And what I thought was interesting, and I should also mention with the manual, is the manual on these SoFirns is actually properly written. I had mentioned that last time, but it is actually pretty darn legible. They really have, what's kind of one interesting aspect is when they did their testing with the 55,000 milliamp, even though it comes with the 5500, so that's pretty cool. But they had this little statement right here: using protected batteries may result in less performance and triggering the protection circuit. So I had never really heard of that before, and I'm glad they actually put that information in there. This new flashlight has a bit more advanced controls, even though you don't have a tail switch. And those controls are essentially a combination of functions through the button. The one thing I will mention is I wish they would make the light a little bit brighter, the status indicator. This also charges through USB-C. So it does come with a USB-C cable here, and that's definitely very helpful. And even though this one came with an independent charger, because 18650s are pretty common, they, I think, made a wise compromise. The 26650s just are too big in diameter for just about any of the 18650 chargers to accept, and not a lot of people have them, so it was wiser for them just to include charging right in the unit. They do use a pretty thick USB cover, and it's actually a bit oversized, so some people may kind of complain a little bit because it's hard to push in. But that's exactly what you need if you want to have any degree of water resistance whatsoever. So I did appreciate that. Anyway, the big deal on this is that it has a variety of modes, one of which is that it has a wide range of power outputs. As we can see, this is known as their 1 lumen moonlight mode, and it's advertised to last a month continuously in this low power mode. And yes, it does use a glass lens, and yes, that is a stainless steel ring. I should show that real fast here, even though that light's off. If we use this magnet, it's not super magnetic, so we know it is stainless steel, but it's slightly magnetic, so we know it's not aluminum, so that was pretty cool. So they have a moonlight mode, but this has both stepped modes, such as this, where you can, where's the darn button? Where you can have it just go up to varying levels of brightness, or In this, you can select to have it ramped, where you press and hold, and it slowly gets brighter, and then you can stop, and then you can press and go back down. Really handy with a flashlight this bright. This is just a real quick comparison of the SP31. You can see where my neighbor flooded their apartment and water seeped through my ceiling. Real special. There's maximum output, the 1200 lumen SP31. And it looks, you know, a lot of people, even friends, say that that's pretty bright. But man, when you turn on this SP33, it's not, it's like the SP31, you know, isn't even turned on. It's just so much more power. And I think that was a wise choice. I think some people even commented, there's some pretty good flashlight forums called the Budget Light forums, and they believe that SoFirn's been reading those and modifying these to basically go with what most of the community desires. But it is pretty cool. The ramped mode is really just by itself, being able to ramp the light up and down from full turbo to the absolute minimum is really just perfect, because you can get exactly the amount of light that you want. But they're smart by that. If you ever want to just pick up the flashlight and just immediately have full brightness, it's just a double click and it immediately goes to full turbo. This has a continuously variable temperature control. Since this is a pretty stout Cree, I think it's like an XHP50.2 LED in there, it's far more power than this aluminum body has the ability to heat sink at, you know, turbo mode all the time. I believe on this one it will step down in brightness levels until it's able to maintain the temperature, where this will vary, where it will drop the brightness levels all the way down to 500 lumens in order to prevent it from overheating. I believe it's 46 degrees Celsius is where that's set at. But if you have to happen to be indoors or something like that, and then go out and it's cold outside and it starts cooling off, it'll actually start ramping back up again. So I think that's pretty intelligent by itself. A triple click gives you the dual mode or the dual rate strobe, and of course it's on full turbo mode when you enable that, and then just a single click to turn it off. Another thing that's interesting is, since it doesn't have a tail switch, they did think about what happens if you accidentally bump the switch. Even though it's pretty flush and can be kind of hard to pick up, the flushness also reduces the chance of accidentally hitting it. But if you do a quadruple press, then what it does, if I got it right, you have to do it kind of quickly, 1, 2, 3, 4. It'll double blink, and what that does is that prevents it from turning on. What it does now in this mode is known as the lockout mode. So if you press the button, it just does that 1 lumen or 1 lumen output when you press and hold the button. So you can still grab it and get a 1 lumen output, but you still have to hit it 4 times in order to get it to go back to its normal mode. Here's the moonlight mode. Even at this supposedly 1 lumen, it's just enough to walk around in and at night and actually be able to see where you're going, surprisingly enough. And they do use what is known as the orange peel reflector rather than this style reflector. And that's one thing that I've also noticed about flashlights, and actually reading those budget light forums, is you kind of have to decide and get an idea of what flashlight you're getting for. You kind of decide, do you want a laser beam, or it's just absolute maximum range? It's a tiny little super bright dot that you can see for a quarter mile away. Do you want a big floodlight? Do you want one that's kind of a combination of the both? And I think that's what this is. Where the SP31 is pretty concentrated, this one is definitely broader. How I believe the best way to say it is, this probably is putting out, in turbo mode, maybe 2,500 lumens in that concentrated spot, and then another 1,000 lumens more of us as a spread, and that's what the orange peel does. I should also mention, it was true on this one, is that, and I was reading online, apparently it's an issue with a lot of flashlights, is they get particles. They don't properly clean out the lens area before they assemble it. In these SoFirns, they are absolutely totally clean on the inside of the lens and the reflector area. So that's also a nice attention to detail. Of course, they advertise Type 3 hard anodization, etc. It's a FET driver, so what that means is that when the battery's fully charged, it will actually send 4 volts, 4.2 volts to the LED module to really get you maximum output. Because apparently the aspect of the constant output drivers is that for increasing output on when the battery is low, they kind of have a cutoff point to where you may not get the absolute maximum brightness. And so that's kind of the deal with these flashlights, is that they, to get the absolute maximum power out of them, that they just use a standard transistor driver instead of it being regulated. So it will slowly dim, but the nice thing about lithium ion is it maintains relatively constant voltage until it's pretty darn low. Other details here, actually let me zoom in. There we go. You can see that they use the dual type, it's knurling, but then when they machine this, they did a very coarse feed rate, because this, this aluminum body spins through a lathe, the tool goes across, it leaves a track in there. But they did it pretty coarse, but they left the track and then knurled over the top of it, so you actually have just a little bit of extra grip. Anyway, that just about sums it up. Let me go outside and do a little bit of illumination test between the SP31 and then this bad boy. So what I'm saying here with this is probably a really great all-arounder flashlight. It gives you plenty of light in the middle, but a nice flood. I think that's really why they average, camping, hiking, hunting, that type of stuff. I think it's really pretty well balanced like that. So it isn't just a floodlight, and it isn't a complete laser beam. It gives you a nice coverage of both. Really, this is probably as bright as a car halogen headlight on low. Pretty darn surprising. And it does have some density, just because they have some extra aluminum in there, and the stainless steel ring is certainly not lightweight. And then that heavy battery, but they had to go with the big battery, otherwise this thing would only last like half an hour. Oh, and last but not least, I've read on some reviews, people are wondering what this is for. It was another wise choice. The whole purpose of that plastic cartridge is, for some reason, your big 2650 is dead, and all you have available is a 18650. It just allows you to use an 18650 in this body and have it be held centered enough to be usable. But they do mention that it really overloads. It's a really high drain, and the 18650s, unless you have special high amp, high output versions, that it can cause the batteries to overheat. So it's something you want to be aware of. And generally speaking, you'll want to stick with the 26650s just because they're a much higher current battery. One last thing I have to mention, these are about $50 on Amazon. You can get them for around $35 off of AliExpress, but you'll have to wait, anywhere from, a week to a month for it to ship from overseas. So that's kind of the deal. SoFirn does stock these in the United States, and they do ship pretty fast, 2 or 3 days. But to pay somebody to deal with that in the U.S. adds some extra costs. So I did want to point that out, that you can get these for this very unit for significantly cheaper than Amazon if you're willing to wait a few weeks for shipping. All right, here's the SP31, the 1200 lumen. Not too bad. Here's the SP33. As you can see, it's just so much floodlight. That really is like a low beam headlight, even in HID. That's just wild how much power that flashlight really does have. Even though it's a flood, it's just still so much power. Once again, the SP31. This is a freshly charged battery, full turbo mode. Still is really good for an everyday carry flashlight. But the SP33 is just no joke. This really is a no joke flashlight. I mean, it's actually crazy that you can get this much power out of a little handheld light. Almost forgot about the strobe. There's what a strobe looks like with this many lumens. That would pretty much get somebody's attention, that's for sure. Not a lot else to say. This is definitely the brightest pocket flashlight I've ever had, and I can deal with the compromises. When you have a flashlight that has this much power, of course it's going to start to get hot, and I was starting to learn that with these, but this definitely does get hotter quicker. But I really appreciate just the amount of light that you can get out of it, and for actually a surprising amount of time be able to have that huge amount of lumens. And then walking around or hiking, you usually don't want to have car headlight amount of brightness, and so they're kind of banking on the fact that you'll use it at more normal brightnesses. The ramping mode is excellent because you can get just the brightness that you want. The variable temperature regulation, where it doesn't step, but it just tapers down and then tapers back up as it heats up or cools down, makes this like an ultimate winter snow flashlight. And a lot of people do appreciate the tail cap switch, but I kind of like the way this functions, because even if you're on like a normal moonlight mode, you can just double click, always gives you turbo. Click again, and it just goes back to wherever brightness you're at. Of course, when it's off, quick access to turbo, just a double click, triple click to get the strobe. Really like that, just a nice, easy quad click, and it's now on its safety mode where you don't have to worry about it dying. And as soon as you unlock it, it automatically goes to the turned on mode and whatever brightness level you had it set at previously. I guess my really biggest suggestion in reading the forums is one suggestion I thought was good is that they could have taken this entire surface and actually made it like concave, so that would have offered a little bit more protection from accidental bumps of the switches. Then if the switch was inset into a concave, the switch could have been a little bit bigger. That way, if it's dark, you could easily feel which surface has the concave on it, and then be able to easily access the switch. But that's always something, you know, a lot of personal preference involved with this, you know, more of the design specifics, exactly how the functionality and intelligence works and the physical design of the switch. And they could integrate a tail cap switch like this, but it could be like a dual mode where you could either just use the tail cap switch and just turn on whatever it was on at before, or you could leave the tail cap switch turned on and be able to turn it off with just the software button. And then that would actually offer people both choices, whether they want tail cap or just to use the soft button. Anyway, and for the fact that if you want to wait a few weeks and order this from overseas, the fact that you can get it for less than $40 is really competitive. That's super competitive. And if you want to pay $10 more or so, you can get it off of Amazon and have it in just a few days. I have heard that some of there are some super cheap, like $32 versions of these, but they don't come with the battery. So if you are ordering from AliExpress, make sure the listing says that it comes with the battery. Otherwise, the price may be a little too good. But the one off the Amazon, once again, does come, that tap, really pretty tight O-ring. But that one, or this one, does come with this huge 5,500 milliamp hour. Actually, I wasn't aware of lithium ions of this size until I got this flashlight. And I really wish these were used a lot more. I could imagine a stick flashlight with like 3 of these in there. Now that would be serious. Like a handheld aircraft landing light, because this thing already is super bright. I like the glass lens and the stainless steel front. That will give you a little bit more durability. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching this long video. And if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe to the Catus Maximus channel. And until next time, Catus Maximus out.